Good morning, happy Sunday morning. I just thought I'd come on here and talk about the new changes that are happening to the Facebook page, and also, as the title of this says, to stop waiting to live your tiny life. Stop waiting to live the dream that you want to live. One of the things that's going to be happening this weekend, after I get through a party with 10 teenagers raging through my house, is to change the name of the Facebook page back to Urban Earth Mum. I wrote a blog on it, on what is an Urban Earth Mum is my company and my business name. And I feel like over the last year I've kind of grown into it and really know what it is I can help with as I go forwards and what I want to focus on. So if we haven't met yet, I'm Sarah Moore. I'm a semi-crunchy control freak that likes to lead people astray. And what I mean by that is I like to lead you off the normal path and to follow the dreams, because a lot of us have dreams such as living in a tiny home that are not normal, that a lot of other people think are not normal. One of my dreams is to live in a tiny home, and by tiny I'm talking 300 to 500 square feet. But I know there are a lot of other people that have the similar dream, but there are many barriers even now to living the tiny house dream. The town I live in right now, there are ordinances, bylaws, whatever they're called, codes, that you cannot build a house under a certain limit. And in other parts of the country, a lot of people get around that by buying a bigger house and parking their tiny house or building their tiny house in the big yard of the big house. It's called an accessory dwelling unit. Those are illegal in the town I live. Any house that you build must be attached to the main building, so you cannot have an accessory dwelling unit. You cannot have Sasha, you cannot have Dad living in the yard in a trailer here. It's illegal. It's actually specifically called out in the building codes. You cannot stay even overnight in an RV parked next to your house here. You have to go to an RV park, and there are no RV parks here. So in order to live in the town, I love living in this town, but in order to live in this town I cannot live in a tiny home. I don't want to move. I have a 14-year-old about to start high school. She's in school here. I love the schools here. I don't want to move, but I still want to live in the tiny home. So how do you get to live that tiny life without moving thousands of miles away to Washington or somewhere where tiny living is more accepted, or out into the sticks where I wouldn't be where I'm at right now? I kind of like where I'm at right now. Well, one of the things you can do is find a small home. This home I'm living in is about 1,000 square feet. It could be smaller, but this size is fine too. But the one thing I would suggest you do if you're thinking of you want to live in the tiny home is to start living tiny in the home you're in right now. Even if it's 3,000 square feet, you can always shut off rooms to understand, or to help yourself understand, if you really want to live the tiny life. Because living a tiny life isn't just getting rid of your stuff. There's a whole different way to live. There's different ways you consume power, because tiny homes have smaller breaker boxes. And if you're living in a mobile tiny house, you've got much less power overall. I mean, if you've ever stayed in an RV, have you ever had to try and figure out whether you could have the microwave on and the hairdryer without tripping the breaker or blowing a fuse? That's the kind of thing you'd have to think about in a tiny home. And one of the, I love to watch, or I used to love to watch, what's it called? Tiny House Nation, where people go from these massive packed houses into 300 square feet, and the house is built and they don't get to see it, and then they move in. They basically have a weekend to move, to completely change their life and move into this tiny house. And what you don't see is, because I get tiny house listings, those houses they build they're on the market 6 months later because they didn't make the transition ahead of time. It's a whole different way of cooking. Even if you have a full kitchen, you'll have a fridge, a freezer, and a full stove. Maybe you'll have a dishwasher, maybe you won't. Is that something you could deal with? It's a whole different way of living because there is no place to put your chest freezer. There is no place to put another upright freezer. So one of the things I would suggest is, if you really do want to live a tiny life, is to change your life where you're at right now, and make it, and tiny size your life where you're at before you move into another house, because there is a lot of transition. You cannot do it within a weekend. It's a whole different way of living. It's not just getting rid of your stuff, and it can take you time to process getting rid of all that stuff too, because there's a lot of memories around the stuff we have. I was talking to a woman at an event last night who has a 3,000 square foot house absolutely jammed with antiques from her parents and her in-laws and other relatives, and she won't get rid of any of it because she's not ready to get rid of any of it. She's not ready to let go of them in order to let go of the stuff. Hey Linda, just talking about tiny house living and how you can start living your dream right now where you're at by downsizing your life within your current house. There's a lot of transition. There's going to be a lot more information and content and resources that I'm going to be putting on this page and also on my website, which I'm going to announce when it's ready. It's not quite ready. That will help you downsize your life now, so that you can live bigger. You can live a tiny life in a bigger house, and then you can decide, because moving house is a huge deal. Awesome, Linda, you're a tiny house. I love tiny houses, but you can't live in them in this town. So there'll be a lot of resources to help you live your tiny life now. Stop dreaming of living the tiny house life and start living it where you're at. And when you come to the point where you think, yes, I'm ready, you can sell and buy a smaller home. There are a number of small homes, 800 to 1,000 square feet in this town. I keep an eye on them. And maybe when I'm ready and one of them will come up for sale and I'll buy it. Or my daughter wants to go live in Philadelphia for her college years. I know the area she's looking at, they're prohibitively expensive, and so we'll be looking to buy a smaller home. That will probably need a lot of work, which is great because I can tiny size it before we move in. Because you cook differently, you store differently, you configure the house differently. It's not simply a smaller version of what you're living in right now. So stop dreaming and start living. And stick around if you want more information on how you can do that. And if you know anybody else, Linda, or if you're watching the replay, if you know anybody that wants to live a tiny house, tag them in the comments and let them know that this Facebook page is not about building the tiny house. There are a ton of sites about building the tiny house. I haven't seen one yet about living in it and how you transition into living in it. So come back here, send people here if they're looking for tiny house life and they want to start doing it now. And enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'm about to teenage proof my house, my little house. I mean, this is a 1,000 square foot house. I packed a lot into it in terms of usage. I'm gonna get 10 teenagers in here this afternoon. So it's, you know, just because you have a smaller home doesn't mean you can't throw a big party. But they're teenagers and I'm going to need to steel myself first. So I hope you have a great Sunday and I look forward to seeing you around.